look so beautiful, and I'm so lucky to be yours.
Hello all my Mad Hatters. Thank you again for joining me on this wild ride we call Classy Sassy Sitcher. My name is Krystal and this is obviously my channel. Just to preempt this video, we are doing a Forensic Friday, but I want to say if you hear the fan to the left of me, that is because it is running. It is very hot in my room. If you hear tiny human noises, that is because I am filming this on a Sunday. My son is here. He's currently doing dishes, so that's the noise you hear in the background. If you hear dog noises, that's because my dog is here. She's currently sleeping, but you never know. She may decide to wake up and stop being lazy. I do live on a major thoroughfare between the two suburbs of the city that I live. So you may hear any combination of fire, ambulance, and police. Mostly ambulance because of the fact that I live between not one, but two major hospitals. So, with that being said, let's get on into this Forensic Friday. Today's case we are talking about is Marilyn Breden, and I'm going to talk about this from a how they solved this and forensic type standpoint. I may do some unsolved crimes that have forensic stuff already figured out and they just haven't found the killer, or who they thought was the killer got off for some odd reason, but it will always be from a how did they come to this conclusion standpoint. The reason I chose this Marilyn Breden, or Lynn as she likes to be called, is because of the fact that it is a case that happened locally to me in the 90s. I was not living here in the 90s, but it is a case that happened on the mainland of the province that I lived in, and I thought it was a fairly interesting case because this case started a new way of identifying people, so that's why I thought I would start off with it. If you see me trailing off or like stopping my diamond painting, it's just because I'm reading some of the notes that I wrote down. I wrote some notes and then I have found a site that goes over forensics and I will read from that as well. But there are some things that were not added into these notes that I kind of wanted to mention before going over the case file. So Mary Lynn, or Lynn as people called her, was a 30-year-old woman who was born on December 18th of 1960 and whose charred remains were found on June 6th, 1991. So she was almost 32 years old. Almost 31 years old. Yeah, almost 31 years old. She was found in an abandoned parking lot dumpster in a West Vancouver, like, abandoned lot. So she was found by a janitor named Milton Diaz, who at first thought that it was just some kids doing some like random vandalizing, and called the fire department to report the fire, and at which time it was discovered that the contents were actually the victim of a murder. Now, they at first didn't know that she was the victim of a murder, and I will get into why, how they came to know that she was a victim of a murder, but Mary's body, when it was found, was so badly charred that she was unable to be identified and was beyond recognition. Obviously it didn't stay that way because we wouldn't be talking about this case. A little background on Mary Lynn before we delve more into how they solved her case. Mary Lynn, at the time of her death, had been working at as a cocktail waitress at number 5 Orange Gentlemen's Club, which is still a gentleman's club in the East off East Hastings Street in Vancouver's Gastown district. So Gastown is like the gay village area, or like how to explain it without making it sound like gay people are bad, because they're not. East Hastings and the Gastown district are where mostly LGBT people hang out, where prostitutes are picked up, sex trade workers and strip clubs are in this area. So she was also a part-time model who had posed for Playboy magazine. Lynn, as she was called by family and friends, had led a lifestyle that was somewhat of a life on the edge, where she was involved in an on-off relationship with a drug dealer boyfriend and often frequented after-hours clubs with a shady group of people dabbling in drugs such as cocaine recreationally. So we're going to get into the notes that are not noted really in this article that I have pulled up, and get on with it. So the case being analyzed today is Charter Mains, which on July 6, 1991, in Vancouver, British Columbia, the contents of a garbage dumpster in a deserted parking lot were set on fire. It was later discovered that the contents were the victim of a murder. Among the ashes were the charred remains of the victim that were burned beyond recognition, and the challenge in this case was to identify both the murder victim and the murderer using very little evidence. The case was later determined to be a homicide case when bullet fragments were found in the brain of the victim. The bullet fragments came from a .22 caliber weapon that was later determined to be a rifle, because I don't know if it mentions that in this. So, however, they were so badly damaged they could not be used for ballistic identification. So what ended up happening is these bullets were, from the heat of the fire, were melted into her brain, so they could not be used for ballistics testing, due to the fact that they had melted into her brain. The process of examining bullets and shell casings in order to link a particular firearm to the crime. So ballistics is that process. This case was selected because of the technique used to identify the victim and to generate a DNA profile for the victim. Remember how I said in the beginning it was like a groundbreaking forensic thing that had never been used before? This is what made this site choose the case because of that. Due to the fact the remains of the victim were so charred, there seemed to be no way to get a DNA sample. However, Dr. Larry Cheeves, a forensic odontologist, which is like a person who studies teeth and skulls forensically, discovered that the jawbone and teeth were still intact even though nothing else was. Tooth enamel is so strong that, combined with the protectiveness of the tongue and facial tissues, the teeth can survive extreme circumstances, including extreme heat from a fire. A rare dental condition called mesiodens and dental records helped to identify the victim. Mesiodens is an extra tooth which never grew into place on top of the two front teeth inside the gum. The next challenge the homicide detectives faced was matching the blood in the murderer's car to the victim, who had no remaining DNA. This seemed impossible until Dr. David Sweet, a forensics odontologist, had suggested something that no one had ever thought could be done. He suggested generating a DNA profile using the tooth pulp. So the stuff when you have a root canal, what they pull out of your tooth, as the root is the pulp of your tooth. That's what they were using. The incredible venture was successful, and they were able to generate a DNA profile for Lynn Breeden, the victim. This has never been done before, which is what makes this case so fascinating. Science and the methods used. The first thing investigators needed to do was to identify the victim. However, this was no easy task. Detectives knew immediately that there would not be any fingerprints due to the condition of the body. During the autopsy, Dr. Laurel Gray, the medical examiner, could find no recognizable skin. However, she was able to find a patch of reddish blonde hair that had not been destroyed in the fire. So everything else was burned except for this woman's, like, one chunk of her hair and scalp. But it wasn't enough to pull DNA off of because it had broke down in the fire. But they were still able to tell what color her hair was. Normally an attempt would be made to analyze the characteristics and DNA presented in the hair. However, the fire had destroyed all of the hair follicles, which are like the root of the hair. So they weren't able to pull it from the roots. So there was nothing left to use for DNA testing. Generally, hair can reveal ethnic characteristics, color, and dyes or treatments, and further examination showed metal pieces in the brain of the victim as well as a fractured skull. These are indications of bullet wounds. However, the fragments were so badly damaged that they could not be analyzed by the firearms unit in order to see exactly which weapon was involved in the crime. When the remains of the body were examined, the blood was found in the sinus cavities, which meant blood was still circulating when the victim was shot. How awful. Like, of a death. To be shot and then burned. Like, crazy. However, there were no signs of smoke inhalation in the victim's lungs, which meant that the victim was dead before the fire. Unfortunately, the heat of the fire had altered the victim's blood chemistry, rendering DNA analysis of the blood impossible. Further examination of the inner organs of the victim revealed the victim to be an adult female. By studying the growth pattern of the teeth and skull, the forensic odontologist, Dr. Larry Cheevers, estimated that the victim was between 24 to 30 years old. So they were pretty fucking close on how old she was, because she was about to turn 31 that December. So they were pretty bang on. A forensic odontologist is a dental specialist who uses his knowledge and application to law. This includes identifying human remains for analysis of dental work. A further look at x-rays told Dr. Cheevers that the victim had a rare dental condition, mesiodens, and a lot of dental work. When police looked through recent missing persons reports, the one for 30-year-old Lynn Breeden caught their attention. She had blonde hair and her dental records matched those of the charred remains. So she had been reported missing by someone. Does not say who. I think it was her work, from what I read on other websites and through Forensic Files, because this case was actually shown on Forensic Files. That's how it caught my eye, because I watched that quite frequently. Now that the police knew the identity of the victim, they had to identify the murderer. Police were able to follow the trail of events to Chris Cruz, a model who and student at the University of British Columbia who also goes by the stage name of Tony Devins. Police connected Chris Cruz to a woman who tried to pose as Lynn Breeden and withdraw her money from the bank. Yeah, so this woman, like, goes to the bank, pretends she is Lynn, like, uses her, identity to try and, like, withdraw money from Lynn's bank account after he had already killed her. Because she owed him money for a coke deal. But we'll get to that. I'm kind of ruining the suspense of the story, and I'm sorry. When police questioned him, they received permission to search his car. There was blood on the outside of it, so he gave them permission to search his car, thinking, oh, there's blood in my car, but they'll never know. Or maybe he thought he had time to clean it up. I don't know. I don't know what goes through these people's minds. It's weird. It's confusing to me at times. So there was blood on the outside of the car as well as inside. His spare tire, clothing, photo album, and tire iron were covered with blood. They also discovered a .22 caliber rifle, which is what he shot her with, and a 5-gallon gas tank and the suit jacket he was seen wearing the night Lynn was murdered. However, the police had no way of knowing who the blood belonged to. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence, but it was not enough. All of the hope of a DNA profiling seemed lost until Dr. David Sweet, a forensic odontologist who had been following the case, suggested to harvest DNA from the tooth pulp in order to generate a DNA profile. So here's where it gets interesting. In order to do this, the pulp was extracted from the tooth and sent to the forensics lab along with blood samples from Cruz's car. Blood cells were then extracted from the tooth pulp and treated with a special chemical cocktail. And this allowed the DNA to separate from the pulp in a clump of complex molecules. Next, the DNA was put through the electrophoretic process, or electrophoretic process. Electrophoresis is when particles are suspended on a solution or in gel. So they put it on this like petri dish type of thing and suspend it in gel for visual context. And the solution is subject to an electric current. The particles are visualized on an autoradiogram, which is basically an X-ray film, which resembles a barcode. So when they do DNA, they'll have like a barcode type thing, and that's basically how they see your DNA. They use electrophoresis. And this is what forensic scientists did to the DNA from the tooth pulp. The DNA was cut into smaller pieces, marked with a radioactive dye, and placed in separate lanes on an electrophoretic gel where it was subjected to an electric field. Scientists were able to generate a DNA profile for Lynn Breeden. They compared it to the blood from Cruz's car, and it was a perfect match. They had enough forensic evidence to charge Chris Cruz with the murder of Lynn Breeden. In this case, the method used for DNA profiling and the dental analysis worked extremely well. However, there are possible issues with these methods. For example, if the dental records had not been updated with recent dental work, or if the condition of the teeth were affected due to trauma. Societal impacts and legal ramifications. Right at the end of the video, charge remains, which is the Forensic Files episode that we're talking about, that I had said in the beginning that that's what caught my eye for this specific case, is what they're talking about now. Homicide Detective Rick Crook says, if you take away the drugs, I don't believe any of this would have happened. Essentially, cocaine was the start of the end. Both Lynn Breeden and Chris Cruz were using cocaine. Cocaine is an extremely addictive drug made from the leaves of the Electrophoresis coca. Long ago, cocaine was even used as a painkiller. It was also Coca-Cola actually also got their name from the use of cocaine in their products. Coca-Cola originally was used, or was made with cocaine, which is what made it so addictive in the beginning. Imagine. Cocaine is a Schedule II drug and takes the appearance of a fine white powder. Drug abuse has become a major issue in society. The rates of drug overdose deaths have continued to increase. That's not a lie, because of the added things they cut it with, like bleach and sometimes fentanyl. It's getting to be a very dangerous drug. In this case, witnesses said that Lynn was looking for cocaine that night. Both Lynn and Chris reportedly shared an appetite for cocaine. They both left an after-hours nightclub together. Some sort of argument took place, perhaps about payment. We know it was about payment. There's no doubt about it, especially if he had tried to convince somebody to take money out of her bank account. As they drove, the argument intensified. Police believe that Chris stopped the car and things became violent. It is believed that Chris used the tire iron to strike Lynn on the head and face in a fit of rage. Like, can you imagine being hit with a fucking tire iron to the face and the head because somebody was so enraged by the fact that you wouldn't give them money for cocaine? Then he grabbed his rifle and shot her in the head multiple times. He then drove with the body to the parking lot where he dumped the body and set the fire using the gasoline container in his car. But why was he driving around with a full tank of, full jerry can of gasoline? Did he stop somewhere to get it? Like, who drives around just randomly with a gas can? Drugs can have a terrible influence on the judgment and behavior of those using them. This case was no exception. The end result was that Lynn Breeden was murdered and Chris Cruz had a sentence of life in prison. But I think he's out on parole now. Nevertheless, while the ramifications of the case were horrible, forensic discoveries in this case were extremely important to forensic odontology. Until this case, DNA profiling had never been attempted using the pulp from your teeth. So that set groundbreaking precedent. Like, they were able to get DNA evidence from teeth. How great for forensic science that they were able to do that. This was a major discovery for forensic odontology, as few believed it could be done. Since then, this method of DNA identification has become much more common. In conclusion, charge remains, the case of Lynn Breeden and Chris Cruz was an incredible breakthrough in the field of forensic odontology. Due to the discovery of using teeth to create a DNA profile, dental records and DNA profiling using teeth they just repeated the last paragraph. Have helped forensic scientists and detectives in identifying people in numerous cases over the years. Working with the charred remains in this case was very difficult due to there being very little evidence to work with. However, investigators were successful in apprehending the murderer due to the perseverance of forensic experts. So, let's find out where Chris Cruz is now. So, having looked up, this is about 15 minutes after my video stopped, I spent some time looking up information on Christian Cruz. He did appeal to the courts and the Supreme Court of Canada, which was dismissed, on his sentencing. And I am pretty sure he is still staying in jail. It doesn't say where he is in jail, but there have been no news releases about him being released from prison, which in the case of murderers, they usually do report on the news in Canada. So with that being said, did you guys find this case interesting? What are your thoughts on it? And did you like this video? Please do like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, especially do comment down below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I do hope you enjoyed this. If there is a case you would like me to cover, please do put it in the comments below. If you would like to see more regular videos like this, please do hit the notification bell when you subscribe to be notified when I upload my videos, which are on a schedule of Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And with that, I will go see you guys later, but not before saying I hope you guys have had a great week. I hope you guys stay happy, healthy, and kind. And I'll see you later. Bye!